Right, I'd like to take a couple minutes to explain in detail a little bit more about these machines and the differences between them and what makes them different than others you might see out there. First one is my original first attempt at modding, and still my favorite machine of the bunch. This is started out life as a standard V120. It's got the 2610 version 2 that has been stripped, and if you notice, the boards are perfectly parallel to each other. I desoldered and realigned. If one tip you can look at if you're interested in improving yours, sometimes the boards are a little bit skewed one to another, bottom one, middle, and top, not sandwiched perfectly. It affects all kinds of things in a flybarless setup with the components on there, and just by squaring it up and playing with the orientation can make things fly a little bit better. So that's why this has been stripped. It's got an XP12 also that has been stripped and set up with also a Wolf metal tail gear in there, if we can see it. Yeah, there it is in the background there. Also got the spin motor on there, micro heli swash, V120 version. Of course, the extreme frame, which is maybe a couple grams heavier than the stock frame, but much more rigid and needed in a higher power setup. And the biggest difference is you'll notice my custom head on here with two carbon fiber rods to maintain the phasing angles. As you can see, this here is perfectly up and down. The spacing of the top balls coming out of the grips. If you take a look at my original flybarless head thread, these are the micro heli grips, and together with some custom spacers that I made here, space these linkages out perfectly on center if you're looking down from the top, so that this forms a perfectly straight line for phasing, and that has a tremendous impact on the way this thing flies. And I have not been able to replicate the flight in the other helis anywhere near as smooth as this one. The ratio on the resolution from the swash to the links with the spacing seems to be kind of some sort of a magical number for the 2610, as this one here is just extremely smooth on the sticks, but I can flip it and do some 3D moves. If I was a better pilot, I'd be able to do more advanced 3D moves. Better than the M120, definitely. And just amazing. I really like how smooth this one flies. The tail is more or less a stock configuration, just adjusted to be kind of free but also having very little slop. It's got the the micro heli pitch slider on there, as all of my machines do, just for slop. And but it's got V120 blades on there. Also, I've got the woodies on all of my machines. They act kind of like a flybarless blade does in the larger scale CP helis, in that it lends a little bit more momentum to the rotor disc, makes it more stable. If you want to put foamies on instead, of course that will make it more agile. That's preference, I guess, but to me it flies best in this configuration. The next heli is what I fly when I want to have a reference to keep me grounded on what a flybarred heli feels like, and which is kind of correct, let's say. So in this setup, it's a 2-cell setup, more than enough power, and I've got the Castle CC10 ESC on there, which is a $50 or $60 item in itself, but it's an amazing speed control. If you've got Castle speed controls on any of your other helis and you have the programmer, you can set this thing up even in governor mode if you'd like. That's got the heading hole 2609 original gyro on there, receiver board. It's set up in the transmitter like a normal heli would be, so I can level the swash at mid stick, low stick, and high stick. So I've got a perfectly level swash on this. 2-cell outrunner config, micro heli swash on there. The Stay True head from Wow Hobbies, which has always stayed true and is running extremely true on this machine at super high head speed that the 2-cell config gives you. And I've also got the micro heli grips on this. It's very free, but there's very little play in the assembly. And so this is my go-to heli when I feel like extreme power and kind of a standard traditional flybar feel. This is a very good reference to have, especially a lot of people have started out these days with flybarless only and think it flies great. Well, if you don't fly a flybar that's actually running well, you don't know how a machine is supposed to feel. Flybarless can feel good until you feel what good is really supposed to feel like. So this machine is a fantastic reference and flies extremely well. With the power on this, you can actually pull off TikToks if you're good with the collective and quick on the sticks. But inverted flight and all that is no problem. This is a real winner. And the final machine, of course, is the M120, which I won't spend a lot of time on because there's a separate video on the first post where you've seen it already. But this is my shelf machine that flies like a tank. It's rugged. It's very crash proof. If you're training and want to go in a little bit, this thing here will serve you much better than a more delicate machine, let's say, such as the others. The M120 is very beefy, but it's hefty, and so it's not going to be anybody's M120 or any config of an M120. Since it shares the same blade structure and the same rotor, so it would have the same circumference of the rotor disc. So with the same rotor disc circumference, same rotor disc surface area, the ratio of weight to rotor disc is very heavy. So you've got a the lightest config is right here in my 1-cell setup, great power to weight or disc loading. The 2-cell config, because of a double-cell battery, weighs a little bit more. You've got a little bit more disc loading, and you can feel the heft of the machine, but the power compensates. In the M120, it's even heavier still in a 1-cell setup, plenty of power with the 915 9G motor, but power isn't everything. You have to look at power relative to size and disc loading, and so this feels very heavy on the disc. It's a very smooth, very stable machine, especially with the 2610 that I've got on there. It flies very well. It's just not going to be the 3D performer that this setup will be, or even the 2-cell original setup will be, but I think it's a beautiful looking machine, and I admire this machine of them all for its looks, for its engineering, its design. I really like this machine, and I'd recommend it for someone that is into helis and likes to have them. But if you're just into the flying, I think you'll find a standard config, or even just a regular 2610 on top of a V120 will give you a better flying experience. But it's all what you're into. If you're just into sport flying, you'd probably be more than happy with just an M120.